most people, or at least most people who listen to this podcast, will probably be aware of natural dyeing. You might even have an idea of what that entails or have even tried it yourself. But have you heard of eco-printing? As we'll hear in this episode, eco-printing comes under the umbrella of natural dyeing, but the process involves taking botanicals in the original form and then using them to print onto the fabric. You can then create different patterns according to how they're arranged. This episode has been made for Check Your Thread by a friend of the podcast, Kat Camfield, who is a sewing teacher and sewing retreat organiser living in Victoria, Canada. Kat spoke to Carly, an eco-printer and natural dyer who creates an amazing range of handmade garments and accessories using secondhand textiles. They talk about the hows and whys of eco-printing, its role in more sustainable clothing communities, and lots more. So stick around a few minutes for this wonderful conversation. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 17 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises, and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hello, lovely one. How are you doing? Check Your Thread is back in the room. Well, like more or less, because I still have a lot of catching up to do. But all systems are go once again. So as you probably know, Check Your Thread doesn't run in seasons like some podcasts do. I just keep churning out weekly episodes until I need to take a break when my kids are off school. But it is a new real life season. Back to school vibes are flowing, and I'm so happy to be creating and releasing fresh new episodes into the feed. So have you had any sustainability wins lately? So my big kid just started secondary school, which means a ton of new uniform items had to be secured. Sadly, we weren't able to get everything secondhand, but through a combo of the secondhand selection at their school, parents of older kids, charity shops and vintage, we did manage to score quite a lot. We got the blazer, button-up shirts, skirts, trousers, PE leggings, PE jumper, school shoes and trainers, all secondhand. We did have to buy the school ties, the sports socks and the PE polo shirt brand new, but I'm happy that it wasn't all that much. And here's another awesome sustainability win from Check Your Thread patron Steph. Steph writes, "This past week, I was winning in the sustainability department. I fixed 2 of my grandchildren's backpacks, one was a broken zip, as they are getting ready for school, and my daughter got 2 pieces of furniture on the Buy Nothing group. One was a love seat and the other was a large upholstered ottoman that opens for storage. Both had areas in the upholstery that were split at the seams. The original owners were getting rid of both these items because of the holes. It literally took me 10 minutes to fix each one. You can't even tell that there were holes. Yay for keeping all sorts of things out of landfill." Yay indeed, Steph. You are amazing in helping your family source these second-hand items and keeping their belongings in use for longer. So satisfying to hear these wins. Okay, classic well-worn segue alert. Speaking of patrons, this week I get to thank new patron Layla for kindly signing up to support the podcast with monthly donations. Thank you, Layla. Patron numbers always decline over the summer as people understandably have to think about rediverting their funds elsewhere. However, if you think that you wouldn't miss the cost of a cup of coffee each month, it would be a big help in building back the financial support that I need to keep this podcast going on a weekly basis. So please head to patreon.com/checkyourthread to see what's going on over there and to sign up for any amount that makes sense for you. Right, so this episode, I'm so excited to be dropping something different in the feed for the first week back. Keeping you on your toes. I became friends with Kat Camfield via Instagram, and she's incredibly sweet and supportive of my work on the podcast. Kat kindly contacted me earlier this year when she found that her work schedule had eased off. And she was asking if there's anything she could do to help with the podcast. By that point, I knew Kat somewhat, and I knew that she was a sewing teacher, so she must be pretty personable. So I said, "Would you like to make a podcast episode for me?" And I'm so thrilled that she said yes. And she came to me with a ton of great ideas for guests. Kat has already recorded another conversation for the podcast that you'll hear soon enough, but this first one is with Carly and it is a total gem. So I covered the topic of natural dyeing with some awesome guests, Amy Taylor and Bella Gonchorovic, a couple of years ago, but I've not really touched on it since. And I've also never directly talked about eco-printing, which is such a beautiful and fascinating technique. Plus, you can really tell that Kat and her wonderful guest Carly have a lovely rapport. Kat's questions are absolute gold, and she delivers them so seamlessly that she puts me to shame. Plus, I could legit listen to Kat's voice all day. I'm also so grateful to Carly for being so thorough in her explanations and sharing what it means to her and how she sees eco-printing and natural dyeing fitting into the bigger picture of a more sustainable worldview. I love, for example, how her activities and processes are guided by the seasons. So do head to the show notes, which you can find in your podcast app right now or on the website checkyourthread.com, so you can get links to both these awesome people and everything that is mentioned in this episode, including the businesses and the books that Carly helpfully suggested. So until next week, when I have another offering for you that's slightly different from the normal Check Your Thread format, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, take care of those in the wider global community who could use our help, save something from landfill, literally anything, and enjoy.
Is everybody sitting comfortably? Carly?
I'm feeling good. Yeah.
Good.
Comfy cozy.
All right. Carly, I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me to come and chat all things natural dyes today, Kat.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about this conversation, so I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Me too.
All right. Can you start out by just telling us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Absolutely. My name is Carly Stefanowicz. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a textile artist, natural dyer, and workshop facilitator. And I'm the person behind a small textiles brand called Lorelei Textile Design, where I focus very heavily, mainly on upcycled cloth that I sew garments from, and then I natural dye everything with plants that I grow and gather locally for the most part. And then I do supplement a bit with some powdered dyes and whatnot as well. I'm joining you today from Victoria, BC, on the traditional and unceded territories of the Algonquin-speaking peoples, including the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. As for what fills my days, they're really dynamic, kind of all over the map, but I'd say mostly I'm either working at sewing projects, definitely getting deep into dye projects in my little home studio that I can't wait to tell you about, and then puttering around my little garden, vending at markets. I really try to take days off. Doesn't always happen, but if I do take a day off, I'm usually like cooking or baking or binge watching like Star Trek.
Awesome. Work-life balance is an important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know from conversations I've had with you before that your work also kind of has a bit of a seasonal aspect to it that is not unlike the season, like the growing seasons, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very seasonally focused. We're like quite in tune with springtime kind of being that time of like activation and growth. You know, the energy levels get higher, the plants start growing. Summer is just, you know, full on. You're busy all the time. The plants are huge. The fall harvest, things start to feel, I don't know, more settled and like grounded, and the harvest is happening. And then into wintertime too, again, where we just kind of start to slow down. Usually after like holiday markets wrap up, I have like a 5-month period where I'm not doing a lot of markets, not doing a ton of sales too. It's just kind of that slower fallow season. And I oftentimes spend a lot of time just relaxing, baking, doing a bit of production, but it's also, again, that hibernation period and incubation period until the next spring comes along and I get to launch all these new wonderful ideas and share it with the world.
It's super cool that your work aligns like that. I don't know that there are too many jobs that are so seasonal aside from probably like directly working with plants like farmers and things like that. So it's really neat that your work has those cycles to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're really at the whim of like what the plants are doing. It's really special.
Yeah. So, Carly, I know that in your practice you do some eco-dyeing and some eco-printing, but for people who've never heard of these terms before, can you define them for us?
So eco-dyeing is also known as natural dyeing, and it's a process of applying color to cloth using natural things like plants. You could use different minerals and even sometimes like insects and mollusks.
Oh, wow.
So like naturally derived substances that are going to apply color to cloth. Eco printing exists underneath the umbrella of eco dyeing and natural dyeing, and it's the process where you're actually going to do direct contact printing with like whole botanicals like flowers and leaves onto your cloth, and then you roll it into a tight bundle and steam set it, where the shapes and the textures of those plants are then extracted. The dyes are extracted into the cloth through the heat, moisture, and pressure of the steam pot. When you open up your bundle and take your plants off of that cloth, you'll have an imprint of the shape and the color of, say, your oak leaf or your coreopsis flower, for example. Both of them are a type of natural dyeing, but natural dyeing is not eco-printing and eco-printing is natural dyeing.
Gotcha. And then how would you contrast that with the term synthetic dye? What is a synthetic dye?
Yeah. Synthetic dyes are something that has been synthesized in a lab by a human. Oftentimes, they will have synthesized compounds that were like the active dye compound inside of an already natural dye. But a lot of these processes and a lot of the like industrial scale synthetic dyes are derived from petroleum products with a lot of really nasty byproducts out of their production. A lot of them are quite carcinogenic, very pollutant to waterways, and they can also cause a lot of skin problems on people too that we're not even aware of. So synthetic dyes are also very reliable and a lot of times very wash and light fast. And they're fast, capitalism. So there's a reason that the fashion industry relies so heavily on synthetic dyes. But my hope is that the public consciousness shifts more towards the nuance and the like specialization of natural dyes as well.
Great, thanks. Can you give us a little background about how do you dye textiles? I mean, a lot of us just buy fabric off the shelf, or we buy clothing from stores without really knowing like where those textiles come from or how they're even dyed. So could you just give us like a primer on how fabric is dyed?
Absolutely. I would say that most of the clothing that people are wearing every single day are dyed with synthetic dyes, which is not something that many of us think about as we're engaging with cloth. But there is like a larger movement towards more sustainable fashion, as we've seen with so many different things like fashion revolution and the slow fashion movement. And then there's natural dyes, which is a practice that's been around for thousands of years, practices that have been around for thousands of years. So there's a lot of steps involved to dye cloth. My expertise is obviously with natural dyeing. So you need to be working typically with natural fibers. So you're working with like cotton or linen or hemp or wool or silk. They're split up into two different groups, protein or cellulose fibers, and then you kind of like pre-treat them in very different ways with different chemicals and different like cleaning agents as well. So the first step is selecting your fibers, ensuring like you know what fiber you're working with, and then you do a process called scouring, which is essentially like a really deep clean where you like strip oils, waxes, and dirts from your cloth, either by boiling it or like really hot cycle a couple of times in a washing machine. And then from there, you have to pre-treat your cloth with something called a mordant. So you'll essentially make a mordant bath. So you'll dissolve your alum is what we use. So depending on what fiber you're using, you would use alum sulfate or alum acetate. You soak your fabrics in that mordant bath, and that is creating like a chemical bond with your cloth so that when you apply the dyes and apply the heat and the moisture, it's going to create an insoluble bond between the cloth and the dye and the mordant. So they're kind of like a little sandwich together. I could get really nerdy about it.
It seems like perhaps you're interested in this topic.
And then when you apply the dyes, there's so many ways. I would say that probably the most common thing that you're going to see when you're walking down the street is like an immersion bath where you dissolve your dye stuff in a vessel of water, and then you put your cloth in and you heat it, and then the dye is absorbed and you get all one solid color. What I work with mostly is eco printing. So that's more of like a direct contact printing where you get like the shapes and textures of the leaves and flowers directly onto the cloth rather than having one solid color. You're going to have a lot of like different definition and texture and nuance going on with it.
Is the process very different between doing like a cloth that's going to all be one color versus the eco printing? Like, is it? Yeah, could you just talk a bit about the two? The difference
absolutely.
Between the two?
Yeah. So like eco dyeing is kind of like, or natural dyeing is the umbrella term that kind of encompasses like a multitude of different like practices and techniques. And then it includes things like immersion dyeing. And then eco printing really is the process of like direct contact printing, where you're like bundling cloth with plants. That could be like flowers, leaves, bark, and then you roll it really tightly and then steam set it. So rather than immersing it into like a bath with like dissolved dyes in it, you're actually going to have it sitting up above the water, and then the heat and moisture are going to penetrate that nice tight little bundle and then like extract and set the colors from inside of the whole plants instead of the dissolved colors.
Okay, so that's a big difference too. So like if you're doing like an immersion dye, are the plants like in a more of a powdered form versus?
It really depends. Yeah, so you can order dye powders and extracts. You can also extract directly from like whole plants. Like you could harvest a bunch of your sulfur cosmos and extract the color into a pot. So you would like put all your flowers into the pot and then slowly heat it up, and then that extracts the dyes and dissolves it and disperses it evenly throughout the water. It's one way to do it. There's just so many different ways to apply color to cloth. It's incredible.
But it sounds like the main difference between those two is like you're either taking your whole piece of cloth and you're immersing it in a solution kind of thing, versus what you were saying about bundling with the plants and flowers and you're steaming it instead.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So one of the things I was curious about, going back in time a little bit, but is eco dyeing now, or let's say eco printing, if we want to focus on eco printing, is the way that eco printing is done now the same as it has been in the past? Is this like a long tradition that's carried on, or has there been changes in understanding in the chemistry of it, or the, I guess not the types of fibers, but like the chemicals or the products that you would use in the dyeing that make it look different today than it would have, say, 100 or 200 or 300 years ago?
Absolutely. Eco printing is a bit more of a contemporary concept. Like there are a few historical examples of like eco printing having been done, but it's not on the same scale as like wholesale dyeing was in the past. India Flint is like a very famous textile designer, and they are the person that's kind of responsible for bringing eco printing into the public consciousness, I think in the last about 20 to 30 years. So not a super long history with it, but with eco dyeing or natural dyeing as a whole, there's some major differences between how modern natural dyers and dyers of antiquity of all across many cultures would have approached natural dyeing. Like for starters, especially in like Europe, it was heavily regulated. It was a sweaty, grueling, gross, stinky job. And there were a lot of rules. Like you had to be a part of a dye guild. You had to go through really long apprenticeships. There were royal decrees on like what types of dyes you could use, because there was trade wars and a lot of other wild things happening. Hefty penalties and punishments if you like didn't follow the rules. Like using a certain dye, you could like lose a hand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it was like really regulated and really connected to the politics of the time.
Very connected to the politics of the time. Yeah, like there's, I'm sure many people who have some language around natural dyes have heard about like royal purple or like Tyrian purple being used only for royalty, and like you could be severely punished if you were not of the right class caught wearing these colors. Not that you probably could have afforded it.
Right.
But yeah. And then there's also like, in terms of like the processes, obviously people are using like wood burning fires and like rain or river water. So like access to like different supplies are different now, where we're like oftentimes using our tap water, maybe still our rainwater, but depending on where we live. And then things like mordants and additives. There's a lot that we wouldn't even dream of using today. Like a lot of really toxic compounds that dyers were exposed to at the time, like copper and tin, and really gross things like fermented urine also comes to mind. That's what I mean. It was a stinky business. There was a lot of fermentation and things going on and interesting uses of organic matter. And then today, modern natural dyers, we have access to so much more like scientific knowledge and like collective historical knowledge too. So we've like learned from these people, learned how to do it better, and have a better understanding about what chemicals, especially the mordants that are a little bit softer on our environment and ourselves as well. Not to say we shouldn't have basic, safety precautions when working with them, but you're not going to get yourself chrome poisoning with heavy metals.
Sounds like it's a lot more fun to do eco-dyeing now than it was in the past.
I think so, yeah. I think that we have like limitless freedom to like experiment and develop our own techniques that are really tailored to like our needs and interests and environments nowadays. Like we're not oppressed by these royal decrees and dye guilds. It's like anyone who has an interest in it can explore it to the best of their ability. And there's so many ways that we can get into it too. I would say that a great majority of the dyers nowadays are working with like less toxic aluminum based mordants. So that's again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, like alum acetate or alum sulfate. So they're the compounds that act as the dye fixatives that are very necessary for natural dyeing. And then I think modern natural dyeing also is really intrinsically intertwined with environmentalism and the slow fashion movement. And people are trying to like develop these like regional closets essentially. And I think natural dyes really play a big part into that. And it's really empowering.
That's super cool. Can we talk a little bit more about the environmental impact of like the eco-dyeing? Maybe we could start just by maybe talking a bit about how principles around taking care of the environment are integrated into your work. So I know we've talked a bit before about like the textiles that you use for your garments. So can you tell me a little bit about what kind of textiles you use, how you source them, that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My practice is really like at the heart of it is like working in like a genuinely sustainable manner, like not greenwashing things. So within my clothing design and art practice, I work like exclusively with secondhand cloth to sew all of the garments that I make for my brand. I source it all from like thrift stores, garage sales, estate sales, that kind of thing, all within my own community. Unless I'm on a road trip, you got to stop at those thrift stores too.
Yeah.
So just the impact of like taking out that transportation is huge. And then we're also repurposing things that are just, I use a lot of bed sheets. Bed sheets are awesome.
I was going to ask, so like what makes like bed sheets a good material for making new garments from?
Yeah, well, a lot of them are natural fibers. They're like really like densely woven, which I really like. And there's a lot of variety. Like I oftentimes will be working with cotton, bamboo, or linen when I'm scouring for my fabric at thrift stores. And they've got great drape. They're natural fibers. They're going to break down back into the environment one day. It's not going to take hundreds of years to leach microplastics into our environment.
Yeah.
And then the color too. Like I've been working with natural dyes for like 10 years, and I started off like very conventional practice, like ordering dye extracts and powders and doing a lot of immersion dyeing. And there's nothing, I would say, wrong with that, but there was something that just wasn't quite feeling genuine or sitting right with me. And I also wanted to explore more texture, and that's when I got into the eco printing. And it's all about finding the color that is just existing in your own backyard, in your own community, and like learning how to cultivate that color, building community to like, pick leaves from your neighbor's trees, and like your friends are growing dye flowers for you. You're growing dye flowers. So that's kind of where I get most of the color that ends up on the clothes that I make.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So when you started making that transition from like ordering more like dye powders and stuff to doing more like actual whole plant-based, had you done lots of gardening already? Was this like a brand new thing for you?
Pretty new. Yeah, it kind of just happened overnight. Like the fascination, the light bulb turned on, and then it just was go for the last 7 years. I had grown vegetable gardens, but never really flower gardens. So it was really fun to start getting into planting little dye gardens. I've never had a lot of access to space, like living in a lot of like townhouses and renting, So I've always made do with really small spaces, but like getting a decent yield for what I'm producing. And then again, with friends and community, I'm able to kind of use up all the flowers I need for my practice. But yeah, it's just been a learning experience the whole way through. Yeah.
Have you expanded from what you started out with in terms of the different kinds of plants that you grow for dyeing?
A little bit, yeah. I've always done cosmos, marigolds, and coreopsis. This year, I've got bidens, which are like these cute little yellow daisy-like kind of like filler crops that I recently discovered a few years ago are great eco-printers. So those are new, and they just pop. They give so many flowers. I love them. And I've got black scabiosa growing this year, and I just invested in a smoke bush shrub a couple of years ago. So it's got leaves, but it's going to be a few years before I'm like harvesting off of it. But it's always expanding. Yeah.
That's super cool. So is it a combination then of annual plants and perennials? Like, are they mostly, and are you growing from seed or?
Yeah, definitely a combo of annuals and perennials. Most of the coreopsis varietals that I have are perennials, so that's kind of like an ever-growing collection. And then I usually am really impatient by the time spring comes along, so I have some stuff that's planted early in the season by seed, and then I do end up going out and buying a bunch of Cosmos starts, and then I'm always adding to my coreopsis collection.
That's fun.
Say a little bit of both, yeah. And then lots of urban foraging too. Like where we live is very green, and there's a lot of very underutilized spaces and really awesome dye plants that are just like in a mall parking lot.
Oh, that's so cool. So what kinds of plants do you do urban foraging to find?
Yeah. One of my favorites is geranium, which is also invasive here. So that's always exciting to go and pick those pretty little leaves. They make a great eco print. And then I also love picking maple leaves, especially Japanese maple. Like the red varietals are like really high in tannin and anthocyanins, and they create these like really beautiful, rich greens. And then smoke bush, or cotinus is its Latin name, is my other favorite to go and pick. And they're like abundant, ubiquitous everywhere I look. I kind of have like an internal map network around the city. So I rotate around picking from those trees and shrubs throughout the summer, but I'm always taking like a little bit here, a little bit there. No one's ever yelled at me. That's nice.
That's great.
So usually people stop and like are curious and like make conversation. It's a nice way to be out in the world.
Yeah, that's super cool. This is like a point of connection when people are like, oh, you're harvesting these urban plants that maybe look like weeds. Like, what are you doing with those?
Yeah, the curiosity. Some person came up to me the other day while I was picking maples, and he told me about how his mom used to pick maple leaves and like make these like pressed flower art pieces. He's like, thanks for reminding me of my mom.
Oh, that's so lovely.
So glad to be out in the world doing this.
That's so cool. And just to think that like, Victoria is a pretty urban environment. I mean, we have access to a lot of good nature as well, but just to think that there are resources at your fingertips that are free, that are just growing wild, that you're not bothering anybody by harvesting. It sounds like you're also very conscious about how much you'll harvest from a specific space.
Absolutely.
So that sounds like it's a really sustainable way of sourcing some of your plants. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's always an adventure. Sometimes I have to work up like the courage to go out for my urban forages. I'm like, do I want to be perceived today?
Yeah, I guess you could time it on the days when you're like feeling like it's okay to connect with other people and field questions and stuff.
Or it's like go out at 6 a.m.
Oh my God, that's great. The sun's rising and nobody else is out except for the really early bird running folks.
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. So like, okay, so you grow a bunch of your flowers, you glean a bunch of plants and stuff. Are there supplies? I'm guessing like the mordant, like you're saying, like the alum and stuff you probably have to order.
Definitely.
Is there anything else that you dye-wise that you don't source, like don't grow or harvest yourself? Or is there anything that you will order online? And
there's a few other sources. You have to get really resourceful as an eco-printer if you want to be doing it year-round. So in the off-season, when the plants have gone to sleep, I work with a florist in Victoria called Bespoke Blossoms. Love them. And they let me come and do what they call a compost bin forage. So it'll be like December and I come in, I'm like, hi, I'm here for my forage. And they let me pick through their bins. So there's things like rose leaves and eucalyptus and oftentimes some like red rose heads. You never really know what you're going to find. So that's one source of color that I get all through the year, but especially in the winter time. And then there's a friend in Manitoba called Big Oak Farm, and she has like a big dye garden and, dries a lot of the flowers and then has them for sale at like markets and stuff in the fall time. And I get a lot of dried dye flowers from her as well. And then I do supplement a bit with some dye powders for the winter time, just so I can satisfy that color itch. And I get all of those from Maywa. They're based out in Vancouver.
Cool. And then, so I guess that also, I'm thinking about, winter, so you're getting some of these fresh flowers and stuff that wouldn't be growing necessarily outside. Are there certain plants that you want to use in its dried format versus fresh? Or plants do they produce different colors if you're using, say, a fresh rose leaf versus a dry rose leaf?
Yeah, and it really depends on the plant. I would say that you're getting more, like, there's a compound that's kind of volatile and breaks down quickly called anthocyanins. It's rather common in like blue or purpley producing things like a red rose petal. So the fresh petals would oftentimes leave these like interesting kind of like purple pink kind of splotches onto an eco print. And I find that when I've worked with dried red rose petals, you're getting more of those like muted rusty tones. So there's been some breakdown in the compounds. But say something like sulfur cosmos, you can use that fresh or dried, and they're both super potent. You're going to get a really bright orange, fresh or dried. I would say working with dried flowers, if you haven't pressed them, you're going to get a lot of the pigment is going to still remain there, but you're going to get a lot more of those abstract prints because you have all of these different shapes going on. Whereas you're working with fresh prints and fresh plants, you're going to get, the shape of the flower printed onto the cloth.
Oh, that's so cool. So you're getting like a crisper shape from a fresh thing, fresh plant, and more abstract with the dry.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I kind of call it like dye confetti in the wintertime. You like take all your
awesome.
dried flowers and like sprinkle them on like a mad scientist.
Yeah. Oh, that's super neat. I never really thought about, the dry versus fresh. Like I just would assume, I guess, conventional dyeing, it's like they can produce whatever color they want. Doesn't matter what time of year, but you're again really connected what's available seasonally, what's fresh, what's not. And I guess I'm curious too. I don't know if you know about this, but what it's like to be an eco dyer in Victoria, where it's like we're in this sort of temperate rainforest climate versus other places in our huge country. Like it must be, it must be different if you're in Ontario or Manitoba, where the growing season is shorter, the winters are longer. Do eco dyers just source different things? Are they just doing a lot more from dry?
Yeah, you have to be way more resourceful in the like eastern cool prairie provinces. Of course, with that shorter growing season, I would say like making more use of your sweet summer season. And then harvesting a lot of things, squirreling them away for the winter. So that would mean like pressing a lot of flowers, drying a lot of flowers, pressing leaves, that kind of thing, so that you can, if you want to, continue dyeing throughout the winter as well.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Do you dry any of your own flowers from your dye gardens?
I do, yeah. Sometimes I can't keep up with how many cosmos are out there. I would say they're probably the number one thing that I press. But sometimes I'll do marigolds as well. And then I really just rely on Big Oak Farm for my dried things, like I get scabiosa, coreopsis, and sulfur cosmos, and black hollyhock from them every fall to use through the winter.
Nice.
Yeah, but because I have limited space, I'm able to like kind of use up a lot of the plants that I get pretty immediately. In the fall time, I press a lot of leaves so that I can use them through the winter, though.
Cool. So seeing as we're talking about like all these different plants and like fresh versus dry and all that, I'm really curious with eco dyeing and eco printing, what range of colors can you get? Could you find plants that will dye something like near black? Or, are you really limited in terms of your colors? Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, I would say there's a bit less of a range with eco printing compared to like immersion natural dyeing. With immersion dyeing, you can get the whole rainbow, every hue, pastel, moody hues, bright colors, everything. With eco printing, again, it's very seasonally dependent. So the colors that I get really shift month by month. In the like springtime, you're getting a lot these like kind of like brighter, juicier colors. I'm getting like these like hot pinks and like hints of greens and yellows. And then as it moves into summer, you get these like brighter, deeper oranges and like hints of deep green, like foresty greens. And then in the wintertime, I work with a lot of leaves and I mix them with iron. So like all these leaves contain a compound called tannins, just like the tannin in your wine, but they produce their own types. And the iron interacts with the tannin in the leaves when you're doing your eco prints. And that's where you're going to get these like interesting blacks and grays and blues, kind of depending on what compounds are in there in those plants. So yeah, blues, greens, oranges, yellows, black, not really red. That is one that is pretty elusive.
Okay. Maybe
you could like take some bedstraw roots and try an eco print with them or something. I haven't tried it. Please tell me if you do. I would say, yeah, you're kind of more at the whim of what the plants are doing at any time. So you're never really going to get that full rainbow with the eco prints. So that's kind of the fun of it.
So one of the things I'm curious about, and I think you might get asked a lot probably, is when you are eco-printing or immersion dyeing with botanicals, how color fast is it? Is it as color fast as like a shirt you buy in the store, or do you have to treat the garment really carefully when you're washing or wash it in a different way?
I do get this question constantly.
Maybe everybody thinks the plants are less strong than they are.
But I have my eager audience here to tell you it's a complex question. The quick answer is yes and no. I think that there's a lot of prep that goes into our cloth before we can apply the color, and that really impacts the permanence or non-permanence of dyes. So proper scouring and mordanting, and then other kind of applications like adding like a chalk or tannin bath all increase that color fastness of our plants. And then there's also the fact that every dye plant is different, containing completely different dye compounds. So each of those compounds is going to have varying light and wash fastness. A lot of yellows will fade over time. And then there's some really extremely fast colors, like if you're working with something like black walnut. So I think I would say it depends. I will say there's some like care steps to improve the longevity of the naturally dyed items that you have in your closet. So I would say washing as infrequently as you can. Maybe your naturally dyed t-shirt is your favorite t-shirt. You got to wash it pretty frequently. That happens too. But cold water is always really important. We want to make sure that we're using a pH neutral, like very gentle detergent. At home, I use EcoMax. I know some other natural dyers use something like True Earth as well, or even, I'm going to forget the name of it right now. It's like that lanolin containing gentle wash for wool. That's also
like Woolite or something?
Not Woolite. I'm going to forget the name.
That's okay.
So yeah, something pH neutral though. And then making sure that we store our clothes out of direct sunlight too. The pH neutral is because a lot of natural dyes are actually sensitive to pH. So you might end up shifting the color entirely if you throw Tide or Gain into your washing machine. And then those are also really harsh detergents that it doesn't matter if it's natural or synthetic dyes, that detergent is going to strip color off of your clothing. So that's another reason that we kind of want to avoid using those heavier detergents. And then keeping things out of UV light, sun fades absolutely everything as well. So there are some natural dyes that are more sensitive to UV light and will fade more quickly, but a lot of them are rather light fast as well. Then we look at historical pieces and they're like, a tomb is uncovered that's 2,000 years old and it's got like vibrant cochineal threads in it. So I would say depends how you take care of it.
Yeah.
How did you dye it?
Yeah. So lots of variables, but it sounds like the general care instructions are probably what most sewists who are listening would do anyway, right?
Totally.
Gentle, cold water wash, hang it to dry, keep it out of the sun.
Like when I'm explaining it to customers at markets, they're usually like, oh, I do that anyways at home. And I'm like, Excellent.
Easy.
Like, do what you're already doing.
Yeah. And this is maybe going back a little bit, but I actually had a question for you because part of your practice is the dyeing and part of it is you're also sewing garments. So are you dyeing your fabric and then making your garments, or are you dyeing your garments after you've made them?
Great question. I also get this one all the time, and I love to talk about it. I actually used to dye the cloth and then make the garment in the first few years that I was doing eco prints. I think as I was building confidence with that technique. And then over the last 3 years, I have now been making the garment and then dyeing the cloth because I feel comfortable and confident in like how that print is going to show up on a garment, where that's like placement and color theory and all of that as well. So
okay, I get it. So it's more about, were you concerned when you were starting out that the eco dyeing might not turn out the way you want it to, and it's like you've spent all this time making your garment?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, because there was some weird off colors, experimental plants, splotchy pieces where you're like, that didn't look great.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Does it make a difference practically in terms of the dyeing process about whether, do you have to worry about the dye getting into the, like around the seams and stuff? Like, is it easier to do it when it's a whole cloth versus a garment, or is it pretty much the same?
I actually think I prefer dyeing the garment itself. I have a lot more control about the placement of where those prints are showing up. So I think in terms of composition, I have more freedom and control over it. There's definitely a few times where, I've cut out a garment and then I sew it up and I've got a Cosmo flower right where your nipple goes.
I mean, just emphasize that.
Yeah, like cute, but maybe not what I was going for.
Gotcha. And what about the thread you use? Do you just use like a cotton thread that is going to take the dye, or are you using a polyester because it's stronger? What do you tend to use for your thread?
Mix and match a little bit. I source a lot of my thread secondhand as well, but then sometimes I just can't find cream colored thread, so I'll hit up the sewing store and just buy regular old like polyester thread. You definitely can use cotton thread as well. I find it breaks a little bit easier. So I honestly, maybe it's not the most sustainable thing, but I'm going polyester.
Well, that's a big debate in the sewing community, right? Like cotton thread versus polyester and the shrinkage and the longevity and all of that. So
yeah. You know my dirty secret now.
I won't tell anybody except for maybe everyone who's listening. So you source your plants from your own garden and from gleaning, but I know that you recently announced a really cool project that you're involved in. Can you tell me, I think you know what I'm talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about this new partnership you have happening?
You all couldn't see my smile, but it's there. I would love to tell you all about it. So I've been working with the Horticulture Center of the Pacific on a little dye garden with them this year. So it's a community education dye garden. So specifically for use in classes that are taught throughout their community education programming. So this spring, we actually got all of the plants into the bed. I taught my first class with them this year in a few years. This has been like a project that has been in the talks for a few years now with them. They're a nonprofit and they're busy and I'm busy and like kind of have woven in and out of this conversation. And they got a new community ed coordinator this year, and we just like picked up that thread and ran with it, and it's really happening now. So it's a space where folks can kind of get to interact with the dye plants a bit more. Part of the workshops that I'm teaching there are the eco printing workshops. So I'm doing that direct contact botanical printing. And we'll actually take our little baskets and go for a golden hour evening walk through the big botanical gardens down to the dye bed. And then we all get to pick our own flowers and then come back up and dye with them. And of course, we hang out in that little garden for a while and talk about the plants, and just having that tactile experience of like touching the plant and touching the soil just connects you with the process so much more. Like eco printing is so rooted in the land. So I think to have that as a very important and highlighted aspect of like the education around it just makes it so much more valuable and so much more meaningful. So I'm just delighted to be involved in this project. I was at the garden yesterday. The slugs ate all my marigolds.
No, No, your poor marigolds. Happy slugs, though, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I might
I'm
be
sorry to hear that.
coming in with some eggshells and coffee grinds next week.
Maggots be gone.
So it's a learning process too. It's like I've only really had access to these small spaces with container gardening for the last number of years. So to actually have like a raised garden bed in a place that's a lot more wild than my like middle of the city townhouse, it's really amazing to go in and be like, okay, like these are the pests that I have to be aware of, and like how can I deal with these in like a non-toxic and ethical manner? Can I companion plant? So it's just brought up all of these other questions and opportunities for learning about dye gardens as well, and gardening in general. And it's also just a really cool community of people that every bed there is run by different volunteer groups. And yeah, it's a great place to hang out.
That sounds so awesome. I mean, it sounds like it's giving you a lot of joy, but also some new challenges that you haven't had to deal with before.
Oh, yeah. We put up chicken wire because we were like, the rabbits are going to eat everything. The rabbits, not a problem. It's the slugs.
Oh, slugs.
Well, it's Pacific Northwest. What are you going to do? It's slug fest over here.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about those workshops you run, because I know, so now you're running them at Horticulture Center of the Pacific, but you also teach workshops in other places as well. What do students get to learn? What is it like for them when they come into a workshop with you for doing eco-printing?
I absolutely love teaching workshops. It's just so fulfilling. Just the opportunity to connect with people. It's always the most interesting people that are going to show up to an eco-printing workshop. We always kind of go around and introduce ourselves, and they're like, I'm a this artist or that artist, and horticulturist and gardener and farmer. And so many like-minded people get to gather and learn together. So I think that's probably one of my favorite things. But the workshops that I lead are mostly kind of geared towards like introductory eco-printing. So they're anywhere from 3 to 4 hours long, kind of depending on the venue and the class size. And we'll kind of break it up into theory and demonstration to start. So we go over like dye terminology, a little bit of eco-printing and natural dye history, some of the like political socio context, of course, as well. Like we talk about, again, like environmentalism, talk about like how much synthetic dyes suck. We talk about how natural dyeing is empowering and gives us hope and agency over our clothing and the textiles that we get to engage with every day. And we kind of set the foundation there, and then we move on into like demonstration. So I bring all the plants that we're going to use for the day. I set it up on usually a big table, and then I get everyone to gather around, and I talk about like the actual method of the eco-printing. So I'll do some demos where I arrange all the botanicals and show them how to like wrap their bundles really tight, give them a little tour of the steam pot setup, and then of course talk about all the different plants and kind of what they can expect. I put that in air quotes, expect. You can't see that because there's no such thing as expectations with eco-printing. You also have to check those at the door. Oh, yeah. And then I also bring a lot of examples so we can kind of like show them a plant and then show them what I got as a print from that plant, just to give them a bit of an idea about what they might get in their prints. Cool. And then from there, we move on to like the hands-on part. So everyone sets up at their stations, grabs whatever plants they want, and then they get to dye their own organic cotton bandana. Those I don't get upcycled because I don't have infinite time in a day.
And you don't want to make a million bandanas out of old sheets, Carly?
Yeah, I used to do that. And I was like, there's too many things on my plate. So now I get them from Maywa, and I feel okay about that. They're ethically made in organic cotton.
Perfect.
There's compromise there, and it feels okay.
Oh, good.
And then, yeah, that part of the workshop is like magical. Like we're always, lots of questions and people feeling really like curious and engaged throughout like the theory and the demonstration. And then there's always this like quiet moment while everyone is arranging their botanicals where there's just this stillness that comes over every workshop, and it is magical. It's like people are fully immersed in their project. They're like engaging with the plants. Their imaginations are activated. It's so special, and I love to bear witness to it. And then we have a little hangout while the plants steam, and we talk more about theory and process. So I usually do a bit more of a deep dive into like the scouring and mordanting process. I would say those two things are the most intimidating aspects of entering into natural dyeing. One, they're like not glamorous and you don't get any color and you're like, where's my results? And two, there's like, you go on the internet and there's every dyer is going to tell you something different. And every dyer, we're all right. Maybe not all of us, but everyone's got their own method to how they approach natural dyeing. So you're hearing all this cacophony of different voices. So it's really nice to kind of like center it and be like, this is how I like to do it. This is the results I get from the processes, from the mordanting and scouring. Foundation for you to work with, demystify it, and then go off, practice, develop your own ways. Or just keep doing it how I do it.
You're setting a good example, I'm sure.
Yeah. And then at the end of the workshop, we get to open up our bundles. And it's like, again, absolutely astonishing. Like, I'm always so inspired by how people like what plants they chose and like the composition, and like it blows my mind that everyone's using the same table full of plants and everyone's piece is completely different from their neighbors.
That's so cool.
And it's like a little gift to ourselves every time you open a bundle of color.
Oh, that's so cool. It sounds amazing. I really have to take one of your workshops. It's been too long.
Yes. It's a true delight.
Oh.
There's a few times I've left workshops where I've like gone home and been like crying happy tears as I drive home.
That's
I'm like,
amazing.
This is so special.
Oh, well, it's like why we engage in textile arts and community, right?
It really is.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So do you have a list of resources that you give to the students in your classes or places that you direct people to? Do you feel like everybody needs to take a class before they could start doing this on their own? Do you have resources that you would recommend?
Yes, I make my own little zine that's full of resources that people get as part of the eco-printing classes that I teach. So within that resource section, I share things like where to source like dye seeds here in like the West, I would guess you would say. Also like suppliers of things like scouring agents and mordants as well. Definitely books.
And you have some books maybe that you could share with the listeners so that they can do some research?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I'm enthusiastic to share them. So I think number one, if you want to get into eco-printing, you should go and buy yourself Eco Color by India Flint. They're the person I mentioned earlier who kind of brought eco-printing into the public consciousness 20 or 30 years ago. I don't have the number on that. It's so inspiring. It's like scientific, but filled with like experimentation and whimsy at the same time. And it's very visually stunning. It kind of reads like a diary or a journal. Like it's like almost scrapbooked in the way that they've like arranged it. It's just stunning.
So the book itself sounds quite beautiful too.
Yes.
And inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely love it. Yeah. And then I think two like really accessible books that I would recommend to like beginners or like novice or even intermediate dyers is The Modern Natural Dyer by Christine Vehar. I might have pronounced that wrong. And then Wild Color by Jenny Dean. So those are both really great books filled with like pretty dynamic mix of different projects. So they'll have like a lot of color swatching, little touch upon a bit of like growing your own plants, a little bit of eco printing, different like scouring and mordanting methods for like both protein and cellulose fibers. So I think though between those three, you'll really be demystified if you're going to sit down and read those books. I also just love going out full nerd.
Give us the resources for the people who want to do the deep dive, Carly.
Yes, I would highly recommend Natural Dyes. It's like the chemistry and techniques and science book textbook by Dominique Cardon. So it's like this tome of information that's, you know, breaks all of these dyes down into like different compounds, exactly what is going on behind those dyes and the actions in there. And then it brings in a lot of like cultural and historical context as well. So it's like a reference book that I love to pick up and I'm so glad that I own. And then The Art and Science of Natural Dyes. So that's with Joy Boutrup and Catherine Ellis are the authors. And that one is like a really amazing resource for like formulas and recipes for like very tried and true dye projects. So you can kind of get like very specific results and like, you know, really emphasizes keeping dye journals and like keeping notes and stuff like that. So if you want to get fully into it, those are the those are the two books where you're like, I know exactly what's going on here.
Awesome. And then, do you have any advice for people who want to start out on an eco dyeing, eco printing journey?
Yes, just do it.
Don't hesitate, just do it.
Just get into it. Yeah, you're going to like be patient with the process is probably really what I want to say to you. Like, it's all a big learning adventure. I've been working with natural dyes for over 10 years, eco printing for 7, and like every single time I'm in the dye studio, I'm still a student. And I think keeping that mindset is very important. You're going to have, especially in the beginning, results that are like, ugh, what is that? And like, what happened there? There's going to be a lot of questions. And that's why you should also keep a dye journal, especially as you are entering into this. I didn't really follow up with or wasn't diligent about keeping a dye journal, and I regret it. There's a lot of dye experiments from like years and years ago that I'm like, I wish I had a swatch of that. So
okay, so what kind of information would you recommend people put in their dye journal?
Absolutely, you could press the plants that you're using and like secure them into the journal. Definitely dye swatches of like different experiments. Maybe you did want to try a new plant and you test out different swatches of like different mordants to see how the colors all kind of interact with each other, and testing things for like light fastness too. So you could have like this one was covered, this one was exposed to sun, and so you can keep any type of detailed notes that you think are going to be relevant to you that you can refer back to. And I think it's really great for like repeatability in projects too, because natural dyes are very unpredictable. You're dealing with a plant that has various like sun exposure, rain, soil content, like orientation. Is it facing east or west? Like all of these factors are going to be at play when you're working with plants. So one plant 1 year is going to possibly die totally different the next year, like, or have a lot of different nuances the next year. Yeah.
Cool. So Carly, I know one of the big things that you do as part of your work is sell the beautiful clothes, bandanas, I don't know what else you make.
Zip pouches.
Zipper pouches, all these beautiful textile-based products. So I'm just curious, if I was at a market, craft market, or one of the other farmers markets or something where you were set up, if I was walking along and I came across your booth, what would I see?
Ooh, oftentimes when folks walk up to my booth, they go, it's just a very like soothing color palette is I think the first thing that kind of like captures people's attention when they walk up to my booth full of all of the beautiful wares that I create. You're going to be immersed in these like soft textures. It's all natural fibers, of course. The clothing that I make a lot of like cute little tank tops, like little peplum tops with the ruffles. I think my probably favorite garments to make are the dresses. So I make a lot of baby doll and like tiered ruffle dresses with like little cap sleeves and like good deep pockets for pick and posies. And then they've been dyed with all of these gorgeous local botanicals too. So I think people's jaws drop when I kind of start describing like, hey, like I designed and that dress is designed and sewn by me. It's made from a bed sheet and I dyed it with plants from my yard. And they're like, what?
Amazing.
Who are you? It's like, yeah, it's very like gratifying and humbling and exciting to share it. So they're all like one of a kind, very interesting pieces as well. And then kind of a byproduct of my garment construction is all of my little accessories. So my zip pouches, I do a lot of like patchworked zip pouches. So I'll take all of my scraps and then I do a lot of dye baths with them. So I have this like pile of all these different colored dyed scraps. And then I patch those all up and turn them into zip pouches. And they're all lined with like really cute like vintage tablecloths and bed sheets and stuff. Yeah, and they're just adorable.
So if I was going to go to the dresses rack because I think they look so beautiful, what colors would I be seeing? And then can you tell me, so like the eco printing and all these botanicals that you've printed on the fabric, what shapes am I going to see?
Yeah, so seasonally dependent, but right now you're going to see the shapes of like cosmos and like coreopsis and
like
bidens.
The actual flower? Like will
Yes.
I be able to see that? Oh, cool.
Yes. So it's really fun giving people like a tour of the dyed piece of clothing because I'm going to point something going out and be like, that's a cosmo flower, and someone instantly recognizes it. And I'm like, that's a coreopsis flower. And yeah, the colors right now, I've got a few different colors of cosmos. I'm getting kind of like deep blues and like a bit of oranges and like these like yellow greens. And then with the smoke bush, you're also getting some like really good blues right now. Japanese maple, I love to use the like super lacy variety of it. So it leaves these like thin, lacy little strands, and those are like gorgeous forest green right now. And then coreopsis and bidens and marigolds, lots of like oranges and like coppers and like tints of green in there too. So really diverse kind of array of colors. And then my role, I work obviously very collaboratively with these plants, is to like arrange them in a way that is like aesthetic and pleasing to the eye. So the prints are landing where they should on the cloth.
Sounds amazing. I kind of want to go and deep dive into your booth right now.
Yeah. I've actually been having a lot of fun lately with eco-printing a piece and then bundling it up, like folding it and then like maybe clamping it in some way and then putting it into a dye pot. So I get like this layering of color. So it's got, say, all these like blues and greens from the smoke bush and Japanese maple, and then I'll throw it into a dye pot with like kutch, which is like this acacia tree that gives like cinnamon browns, and then you have this kind of like shibori style dye project with it, with all of the like texture and nuance of the leaf prints and the immersion dyeing, and
that sounds
it's delightful.
Amazing. That sounds so great. So Carly, your practice is like on a fairly small scale because you're one person producing all these eco-dyed goods and eco-printed goods. Do you know, are there any companies that eco-dye cloth on a larger scale? Like, let's say I wanted to make a quilt out of eco-dyed fabric. Can I order them online somewhere?
There aren't actually a lot that I'm aware of, but there are a few. Some place that comes to mind is Botanica Tinctoria. So they're not going to have like large pieces of cloth, but they have a lot of like sewist like findings, so like trims and threads and that kind of thing. And I think they're pretty niche in their market too, and that's also being done on a rather large scale. And then I also think of Green Matters. They're based in the US, so they're like a dye house that has been able to scale up. So they've got some like industrial like dye tumblers, and I think they actually accept people like sending in cloth for them to like custom dye and such as well, and then do like contract dyeing for like small clothing brands as well. And then Meiwa, they're kind of not necessarily they themselves are dyeing their cloth, but they team up with a lot of artisans and specialized craftspeople in India, and like whole villages will be contributing to a lot of the products that they sell, like hand woven, naturally dyed pieces. And that's on a rather large scale as well, I would say. But there are, I think, some issues with like scaling up natural dyeing and eco-printing. Of course, there's like resource availability, like how much land are we willing to like devote to growing these plants, like for a very specific reason that isn't food. Water usage is another big one. Like natural dyeing does use a fair bit of water. So like I know there's some places, I think Meiwa actually is involved in like kind of a closed loop system where they're like recycling and repurposing water throughout the entire process to try and reduce that water waste. One of the reasons that I love eco-printing so much is that it does use less water than traditional immersion dye baths, because you're just steaming it rather than having these huge pots of water. And then consistency. I think a lot of people, consumers, have come to expect, because of synthetic dyes, that they want the same black t-shirt every single time, the same red every single time. And that's not always going to be possible with large scale and small scale natural dyeing. Again, talking about all of these variables with like weather and soil and like rainfall. So I think with the water usage, consistency and like results and resource availability, I think being able to scale up natural dye production kind of has to come hand in hand with like shifting consumer expectations and perception as well. And like accepting that like natural dyes are luminous and like nuanced and maybe aren't always going to be that perfect even color. Sometimes they absolutely can be, but not always. And then there's also, again, like the skilled labor that is required for applying natural dyes to cloth is a whole beast unto itself. So I think there's a lot of challenges that need to be navigated. And I think there's a lot of people that are starting to really think about this and implement those practices, even some bigger fashion brands like incorporating like a naturally dyed specialty line into their like seasonal releases. And like, so I think it's incremental is what it is. Like even 10 years ago when I started natural dyeing, I would tell them what I'm doing and they're like, what? And now 10 years later, it's like, at least I'm getting, oh, I saw that on Instagram or whatever it might be. So I think the literacy is coming around with it. And I think with that, there's going to be more demand. And then I think we're going to see some scaling up with natural dyeing.
That would be cool to see in the coming years if that happens.
Yeah.
So if it was like a perfect dream world, Carly, where all the textiles were being eco-dyed, what do you think the benefits would be?
Yeah, it's hard to like overstate how much more gentle they are on the environment. I think like in my perfect world, we have like hyper regional fashion brands and dye houses even and artisan dyers and like a network of them. And we're not so reliant upon dye houses across the ocean that, you know, are leaching their synthetic dye compounds into the waterways, and then we're puffing up all of the natural gases into the environment as we transport it across the ocean. So I think in my dream world, we have more literacy. People are learning these skills, and there's like small pockets of this kind of popping up in regions and communities all across the world, and less reliance upon big fast fashion as a whole. That's my dream.
That sounds amazing. I love it.
One of the reasons I teach workshops. Let's empower each other.
Yeah, awesome. Carly, thank you so much for coming in today. I feel like I learned a lot, and I'm sure that people listening are going to learn a ton too. I find your work super inspiring, and it's really made me reflect about my own fabric consumption and how I could incorporate maybe some eco-dyeing into some of my own sewing and garment making practice. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat. It was a real pleasure, and I look forward to doing some eco-dyeing with you.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!